So today's presentation, as we can see, it's a one of our historical series. So Charles Algernon Parsons, development of the marine steam turbine and SY Turbinia, 130 years on. It's going to be given to us by Keith Hutchinson of the Safinah Group, who I think you all know, but just a little bit about Keith if you don't. Keith is head of the professional technical and engineering services sector and senior consultant in whole ship design and naval architecture at the Safinah Group on Tyneside, where he undertakes commercial and offshore marine consultancy for a range of clients globally. He has held senior roles in the design of a wide variety of ships, having previously worked as a researcher in ship design and a shipyard experience in construction, conversion, upgrade and repair. Over a 37-year career, no, he doesn't look old enough, it is, as a ship designer and naval architect, Keith has been constantly at the forefront of the technical development of robust but flexible solutions for a multitude of extremely novel, complex, bespoke merchant ship and offshore vessel design problems, both new build and conversions. He has consistently strived with clients to explore unknown multiple dimensional design spaces, utilising both established and emerging technologies. Keith has published over 65 technical papers and given many more public presentations and lectures. He is a member of numerous industrial technical committees. He is a chartered engineer and a chartered marine engineer. Together, we've been a fellow of the Royal Institute of Naval Architects, the Institute of Marine Engineering, IMAREST, the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers, SNAMI, and also the North of England Institute of Mining and Mechanical Engineers. And we are very privileged to have him here because he's also a liveryman of the Worshipful Company of Shipwrights and a freeman of the City of London, showcasing his leadership in the maritime industry. So with that glowing introduction, Keith, we very much welcome you here and look forward to your lecture.
Thank you very much, Keith. Unfortunately, you've had the organ brain and now you've got the monkey. So this is the Keith show, and Keith is a much more eminent Keith than I. Well, thank you very much for coming along today. Hopefully you'll find this interesting, as it is a historical talk. A little bit of what I'm going to talk about. So basically I'm going to go through the early life and quite early career of Charles Parsons, who, for argument's sake, is probably one of the best engineers the UK has ever produced. An avid inventor, a real pioneer in engineering, and we all know him because of the steam turbine. But he was a mathematician, as I'll show, in a mechanical engine. Well, mechanics he did at university. But he also managed to be a bit of a naval architect on the side. Now, I'm not quite sure I like that, but never mind. Mechanical engineer has been naval architect, but he wasn't. He produced probably one of the groundbreaking ships that's ever been produced. And the reason I've done this is it's actually 130 years since the ship I'm talking about, the Turbinia, was actually launched. It was launched in August 1894 into the Tyne. So that's what the whole of this is about. And if you want to read a little bit, I've done quite a light-hearted article in the Naval Architect last month. It's only a few thousand, 3,000 words. Quite readable for anybody that's not a naval architect, hasn't got any hard sums in it. Luckily, the Turbinia actually still survives. She had a little bit of a checkered career. She was bent by a ship launch. It was chopped in half. Bits of it were brought down here, but it's now together in Newcastle. It's pride of place in the Discovery Museum and the Turbinia Gallery at the Trust Show. And she's also modelled her on the ship simulator at South Shields, so you can actually drive it now, if only virtually. So this is what I'm going to try to go through. So a quick introduction of me, although Keith's really done it. I'm then going to talk about Sir Charles, his early life and career, and then his early development of steam turbines, then his development of the, as I said, the steam yacht Turbinia, 130 years ago introduced, and then I'm going to go through the next rough decade up until 1907, showing just for the Royal Navy, not for foreign navies or for merchant ships, because it was brought in quite quickly into those as well, was the adoption of the steam turbine as to basically very quickly usurp the steam reciprocating engine in frontline warships. The steam recip still carried on, and then really within only a decade, the production of probably what is one of the most famous ships ever built, the RMS Mauritania, which held the blue ribbon for over 2 decades. So I'll quickly go into her. Then I'll go about Turbinia today, because she still exists. And then if you've got any questions, I'll answer them. If not, I'll go for supper with Keith. So, okay. So introduction of me. I don't think I need to say very much. I'm head of Safinah's Professional Technical Engineering Services. And really, we'll come out of really Swan Hunter Shipyard via other consultancies, and we'll cover the whole gambit of ship design through to construction, even doing shipyard planning and operations. One of my colleagues is actually been a shipyard planner most of his life. So we offer the whole range of stuff, and that's some examples of some of the different assets that I've been involved in designing over my career. I've been very lucky. And it's been an interesting career. It's been challenging and stressful, but therefore the little hair that I have left hasn't got much colour in it. So, okay. So Charles Parsons. So there he is. That's Sir Charles in 1912. So this is his photograph when he became president of the North East Coast Institution of Engineers and Shipbuilders, an institution that unfortunately wound up in 1993, it was wound up. He also was a president of the IMRS. He was never president of RINA. However, his daughter became one of the first 3 female members of RINA in 1990. As I said at the outset, he's one of the UK's really greatest engineers. Prolific inventor, had over 300 patents. And I think of particularly a note is the fact he was the first engineer to be admitted into the Order of Merit in 1927. So he was born in 1854 as the 6th and the youngest of William Parsons, who was a 3rd Earl of Ross, a very famous astronomer. And they had their seat in Ireland, in what was then Parsonstown. It's now the town of Birr in Carnarvon Valley. And it was famous for the Leviathan of Parsonstown, which was the largest telescope for over 70 years. And it was built between 1842 and 1846 and had a reflector of 1.83 meters. So it was absolutely huge, and it's still there. As well as that, you had workshops both for engineering and chemistry, and Sir Charles had the benefit of tagging along with some of his assistants and being taught at a very early age some advanced techniques. And a lot of these scientific assistants the Earl of Ross had actually went on to be very distinguished scientists in their whole life. So he had a superb start in life, exposed to a lot of front edge, cutting edge sort of stuff. Then at the age of 17 in 1871, he went to Trinity College in Dublin, and 2 years later went to the sister college of St John's in College in Cambridge to study mechanics and mathematics. And he graduated 4 years later with a first in mathematics. It's worth noting here that at that time you couldn't do engineering. So Sir Charles wasn't officially educated as an engineer on the piece of paper, but he certainly became one of them, one of the best. And he was then went to an apprenticeship. He became an apprentice when he finished his degree. It wasn't a normal apprentice; it was a premium apprenticeship, and he was apprenticed to Sir William Armstrong, who was one of the big industrialists on Tyneside. So this is the Elsick Shipyard. So the Elsick Shipyard is on the north bank of the Tyne, just upriver from Newcastle. If you know Newcastle, it's just round the bend when you go over on the train on the north side. And it was one of the pioneering shipyards of the time, and Armstrong produced hydraulic cranes, awful lot of large guns for the Navy and also foreign navies. And he was, as I say, he got a premium apprenticeship there. And that actually, for the honour of doing that, you paid Armstrong £600 a year. Now, just to put into some perspective, that's about 10 years' wages for the normal man, paying every year to get this premium apprenticeship. But what it allowed Parsons to do was to learn the actual hands-on techniques and understanding of workshop and construction, and that paid dividends moving forward. When the first year of being there, he actually took out his first patent on a 4-cylinder rotary steam engine, and actually was constructed at Elsick. And before he finished his patents, his apprenticeship, he published another 2 patents. So by the time he'd finished his apprenticeship, he had 3 patents. I don't know how many people in this room have got any patents, but I've got 2, and I'm 56. So you can see he's quite an astonishing man. He moved at the end of his 4-year apprenticeship down to Hutchinson and Company in Leeds in 1881. He spent over 2 years trying to do systematic experiments into impulse gas turbine engines, and this was to drive torpedoes. And this was very successful. Hundreds of these were produced for the navies around the world. And his 4-cylinder engine actually went on, and 40 of them were built by the time he was there. He knew it wasn't ideal, but he was starting this journey towards the steam turbine. He spent a long time also thinking what turbines are used for, as well as naval as propulsion. Spent time also looking at dynamo technology as well. And
yeah, can we have the slides on, please?
Sorry?
We cannot see the slides. Those of us online. We're stuck on slide 1.
Still on slide 1? That's weird because it's showing that it's. I'll stop sharing this and then start again. Can you see the slides now? Hello, those who are online, can you see the slides now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And now, can you see it in the full screen?
Okay, so I hope you can see that now. And at his time there, he actually started looking into actual steam turbines themselves, purely rotary engines, using cotton reels and cardboard blades and that sort of thing. This is the genesis of his steam turbine. So very young, in his mid-20s, he's starting to look at this, and he's realizing the fact that you've got the efficiency, and also it's a lot quieter, which for power stations at that time, which obviously very much in the infancy, and power stations aren't something that's out in the hinterland, they're in the centre of cities and towns. That's quite important, because you don't want this thing thumping away all the time. So you know, it's early on the benefit of the turbine for power generation. And then a few years later, in 1884, he moved back to Tyneside and invested £20,000, as you do, in 1884, to become a junior partner in a company called Chapman, a very famous company in Tyneside, defunct now, but was into marine handling and such things, a lot of marine equipment, and they were looking to try to get into the electrical side. So he was appointed as chief electrical engineer. So there's a man who's done mathematics, he's done mechanics, now he's doing electrical engineering. And So this was a brand new electrical department. He set that up. And within 4 months of being there, he's filed another 2 patents to do with the steam turbine for electrical generation. And within 6 months, that actually had the first experimental turbine dynamo constructed, and that's, you can see it there in the top right-hand corner, and that's actually in the Science Museum. And over the 5 years he was there, there was 288 of these sets actually produced. So you can see, in a small space of time, the progress in the technology and that is moving forward to a pace that you can just dream of these days. There's no way you're going to do that sort of thing in purely, a few years or a few months even. One of the first one put onto a ship was put onto the SSL Percy. It was only a small 2 kilowatt machine, and it was actually, just to put it in context, rotating at 10,000 revs, which is pretty quick. And that's actually preserved as well in Sheffield. But over those 5 years, he managed to increase the powers tenfold by an order of magnitude, and also get the efficiencies up as well, which is the most important thing. And by the time, towards the end of his time there, he designed a 500 kilowatt machine. But Clark Chapman weren't interested in this, because that was purely really for the land-based power stations, and they were very interested in marine applications. So he actually went on and then founded his own company, SY Parsons and Company in Heaton, who are still there. It's now Siemens. Still, I don't think they produce steam turbines anymore, but they still service the steam turbines that were built. And he went along with a set of about 50 workers, and about 12 of them followed him from Clark Chapman's. Also that year, he founded the Newcastle and District Lighting Company to obviously put his steam turbines into to generate electricity. Because if there's not a market there, you need to create the market. So this is something that needs to be done for some new technologies that are going ahead now, I think. But that's another conversation. One thing that obviously with him working with Clark Chapman, when he put the patents in for his actual flow turbines, those patents were then held by Clark Chapman. So he thought, right, what am I going to do? So he designed the world's first radial flow turbine. So it's only a 32 kilowatt machine, but he produced 120 of these over the period of 5 years. And the biggest he ever produced is actually sitting there in the top right hand corner. And it's interesting, that one is 2,000 horsepower, 1.5 megawatts. The biggest one put in a power station was 200 kilowatts, but that wasn't meant for power generation. That was meant for marine propulsion. But what he knew was he couldn't get the efficiencies out of the radial flow turbines. But in the end of 1893, he agreed a value for his patents that were under Clark Chapman, and got his patents back, and then started designing then actual flow turbines, because these were 10 to 15% more efficient than the radial flow, just by pure physics. And then never built another radial flow turbine again. However, he had built this turbine, and this turbine was obviously meant for one purpose, or to go in one ship, which we'll come to in a minute. So that ship was actually the Turbinia. So as I say, he managed to get his patents back, but not by the time he built this turbine. So in 1894, he actually put in another patent called propelling a vessel by means of a steam turbine, which turbine actuates the propeller or paddle shaft directly or through gearing. So he's then got the whole thing locked up for steam turbine propulsion offshore, whether you use a screw or use paddles, which even then paddles were gone really. But for tugs and some steamers, they were still there. And then that year, he also founded the Marine Steam Turbine Company, based in Wallsend, more by the river, a little bit towards the sea and on the River Tyne. And this was specifically to get applications for his marine steam turbine and to construct the Turbinia. So he had the capital to construct the Turbinia. his father had a steam launch, and he'd been very interested in sailing and ships. And he actually, as I alluded to before, actually designed the hull form of the Mauritania. And up at the top right hand corner is one of the models that he constructed and ran. And some of these tests were actually done up Wrighton, which is a further upriver from Newcastle. Running on the ponds there, running back and forth with stopwatches to look at the wave profiles and that sort of thing. And you know, you looked at the technologies that were there, looked at the existing yachts of that time, or, you know, steam yachts I'm talking about, and adapted those to fit his technology of the steam turbine. And it's got some details there of all the different assets to the hull form. But one thing to be marked is that he developed all of this in 5 years. So from nothing to 5 years, a ship in the water, you know, steamed up and going along the River Tyne doing speed trials. And that's the whole of the thing, the hull and the machinery and propellers. So he's done the whole gambit. And that's absolutely astounding. Absolutely astounding. So let's talk about the Turbinia for a little bit. The Turbinia in itself is purely experimental. It can't carry anything. It gets up to speed. Because of the dynamic lift you get, you actually start to lose stability. And if you put she's got a tiny little bit, but even when you put that over, she really goes across and she really runs out of stability. And she really gets up onto that semi-plane and type thing. You can see her running trials there, and on the Tyne in 1894. And she is particularly extreme. I'll show you some examples in a minute. But what it showed was he had a good understanding of wave resistance. Now, bear in mind, we're in the early years of understanding scientifically resistance of ships and wave making resistance. And he knew above a speed length ratio, there's not too much maths in here, don't worry. So VS is ship speed, length on the waterline is a ship's length. Yeah. So that's the speed length ratio. Above about that, wave making resistance starts to go up like that, and he knew that, and he was sitting at about 3, so he knew he had to get the narrowest possible form. But bear in mind, he still needs to accommodate his boilers, his coal reserves, and his turbines, even though the turbines are a lot lighter than the steam reciprocating engines. So that forced him really, you know, his LCB. If we were going to do it now, we'd put LCB a little bit further back, but he couldn't because he had to fit all this heavy kit inside. So now, he wasn't a shipbuilder, and he actually didn't get this ship built at a shipyard. He got it built at a steel fabricator called Brown and Hood. And it wasn't given a name, it was just called experimental launch. So obviously, we keep all of this under the radar a little bit. And he starts running these trials in November 1894. This is when his luck sort of runs out a little bit. So I'll come back to what his luck runs out on, but he thinks he should get about 32 to 34 knots. He starts to get 15 to 20, but we'll come back to that. But this just shows some dimensions. So she's 100 foot long, about 30 meters, but she's only about, you know, 2-3 meters wide. Very, very narrow ship, an L over B ratio of 11. Now that's extreme. That's pretty extreme, even for now. A very fine block coefficient, so that's more like a naval ship now. Prismatic coefficient is extremely low, and if you just note where the LCB is, so she's a small ship, but she's extreme dimensions, even for things of the time. So what I've plotted here, and I've managed to miss off what the lines are, so apologies. This is a set of fast naval craft going from 1905 up to 1905 to 1982. They're done in sort of groups of decades, pre-First World War, First World War, so and so and so and so. And you can see Turbinia as a total outlier. So it shows actually, as an operating ship, she's not an operating ship. You wouldn't design the ship like that. It's got one purpose, and that is to demonstrate the marine steam turbine. Full stop. So bear that in mind. If you look at it and you think, well, we wouldn't do it that like that. He's doing it for a simple reason. Bear in mind, he's doing this 130 years ago as well. He doesn't have access. So that's what she looks like. This is some work I did about 30 years ago now. And you can see here the very fine lines, the aft end coming up to get good flow into the props, a very fine fore end, try to prevent any slamming, try to cut down the wave resistance. The counter at the back to try to stop the run and trim if she can, to try to keep up, because he knows she's going to lift, she's going to get hydrodynamic lift. So he's trying to keep that to an absolute minimum. So just to go in there, I said there wasn't any hard sums, but for the naval architects, I thought I better put a little bit of naval architecture in here. So these are some model tests that were run actually just after she was built and demonstrated at Spithead, which I'll come to. So you can see I've went through and I've plotted these using the Froude analysis on 2 different ones and the ITTC smooth. So the red line there is the line we would use now for smooth resistance. And if I then append it to put on the appendages that were there, I get a speed curve. So the red curve there, the 1990 top one with appended and corrected, is Turbinia. You can see that the smooth line down below is our naked. So that's without any appendages, that sort of thing. And that's plotted over the top of a series 64, which is a series from the early 60s, an American's high speed craft series. And you can see 70 years later, he's pretty on the money. Can it get much better? So you know, bear in mind, he's not a naval architect, and he's working 70 years earlier. He's actually got quite a good hull form. So, but that's a smooth line. Obviously, the one there, I've got a note from line on, but we'll leave that. And this then also shows against some other ones. So these are around bilge displacement forms. So the blue one's a 1960s American one, but the 2 other ones are the MPL series. So the light blue and the green are the MPL series for round bilges, semi-displacement forms. That was done in the 1980s along with Teddington. And you can see he's pretty on the money there, even though he's a lot longer and thinner. He's got a longer L over B ratio. He's still pretty good, given that this is done 90 years later. So he's pretty on the money. And this just then shows I got some plane and craft. Obviously, you would expect the plane and craft are a bit higher because you haven't got those high Froude numbers yet, where the plane and craft could go. You can see Turvinia's red line there. She would start to, sorry, that's not working. That would start to go asymptotically up as you start to go to high speeds. So that would take over. But you can see pretty good. He's doing well. So he's got the whole form right. So why is he only getting 15 or 20 knots? So this is what he originally had. He had on the top there. He had a 1.5 megawatt steam turbine, radial flow steam turbine we've seen before, driving a single shaft with a single propeller, and he gets 15 knots, and he's thinking he should be getting 30. What the heck's going on? So tell you what, we'll change it. He played around with different diameters of propellers and pitches, and then he settled with on the single turbine 3 propellers on the shaft to try to get it. Now that got him up 20 knots, but he couldn't get over that. And he knew what his resistance curve was. He knew what his resistance would have shown the resistance. And he knows what the power of his turbine's getting, because he actually went and developed a simple torque meter. So he knows he's getting 2,000 horsepower out of that engine. So what the hell's going wrong? Well, the propellers aren't absorbing the power. Quite simply, he knows his hull's right. He knows his engine right. It's just what's going to produce the thrust is not producing the thrust. And why? Well, I'll plot it here again. No hard sums, but this on the y-axis is efficiency. Okay, propeller efficiency. 1 is ideal. You're never going to get there. But if we look here at the dark blue lines, which is the Gone Bulls series, which is a series from the 50s and 60s done at Newcastle, naval type propellers. You can see he's way down on the efficiency curve for the thrust that he's getting. And basically what this is showing, he's getting a thrust of about 40%. He thinks he should be getting something about 60, 70%, which he should be getting out of a propeller. You can see here, we should be there. But why is that? Well, this x-axis is thrust. It's a thrust coefficient. So it's showing you're really loading those propellers right up. And what's happening? They're cavitating, right? But nobody knew what cavitation was. People were starting to get it, Barnaby and that, you know, they found this on the Darren and that sort of thing about that time, the mid 1890s. So what did Parsons do? He went and invented a cavitation tunnel, the world's first cavitation tunnel. And that's it. It's still in existence. You can see Ian here, one of the old guys at Newcastle. And that's Parsons' original cavitation tunnel from 1885. That's against the big tunnel that was in Newcastle, is now Blythe. Just to give a size, so you can see how big it is. Not that big, but it works. It allowed them to understand cavitation on a propeller, which you get in pumps and that sort of thing. It's well understood now, but it was right at cutting edge technology then. Just to give you an idea how big that is, that's the Newcastle tunnel in section. So it's 10 meters long by 8 meters high. And you can see just that inspection section there is the section you can see there. So you can see this change in scale. I could tell you a lot about that tunnel, but that's for another day. So he went and done that. So that allowed him to understand what was going on. Now, by this time, he'd got his patent spot for his actual flow turbines. So what he did, he produced 3 500 kilowatt turbines. So he's still got the same installed power, 1.5 meg, but now he's got 3 shafts and he's put 3 propellers on each shaft. And what does that give him? Nearly 33 knots. So he solves the problem. He's now got the transmission of the power through the propellers to push the ship through the water. And he's got his 33, 34 knots that he thinks he should get. And this just shows you, this is the Turbinia in the Discovery Museum, as it says on the left-hand side there. And you can just see 2 of the shafts there. You can see the port shaft and the centre shaft with 3 bladed propellers on them, and the tiny little single rudder. So in essence, I don't know if any of us are petrol heads, but in essence, it's a TVR. It likes going in straight lines, but doesn't like going around corners. So that's exactly what Turbinia is. And that gives another shot. You can see the 3 shafts here. So you can see the 2 outer shafts and the centre shaft. So he's doing 3 propellers. God knows what's going into the weight profile and the propellers downstream. I don't know. Maybe that's something for Siemens to look through in the CFD. It'd be quite interesting because I've got no idea what's going on there. But anyway, he gets there. So he's now got it. So what has he done? He's moved. So he's offloaded his propellers. And I can't be exactly sure how the propellers are working because of the fact that you've got them downstream of each other. But I think he's operating somewhere in this range here. So he's offloaded them and managed to get the efficiency right up. So about between 0.6 and 0.7, something like that. I can't do it because the map. Maybe Dimitri can do a little bit of work in here at the weekend on it for us. But that's what he's done. So he's pushed the boundaries of hull form design as much as he can, of propeller design, just to prove his new engine design. So this is a phenomenal, really, if you think of this asset, it's absolutely amazing in itself. It might be 130 years old, but how much is new in there is a tremendous amount. And if we now look at transport efficiency, so this is the amount of weight you can carry, and it's not usable weight because the Turbinia isn't a usable ship, but if you think about actually the displacement of the ship, well, and its useful carrying weight, it's actually pretty on there. So that's those set of vessels that I showed you, warships, so they don't carry any dead weight of any useful purpose. They just carry fuel and a few bullets, in essence, as well as the people. So it's not carrying cargo. So that's them. So you can still see that she's above most of the lines. She's doing really well. She's only better by an SES, surface effect ship, really, in efficiency terms. So he's right on the money. He's got it absolutely spot on. So, and that's her running at speed in the North Sea. So you can see the lift that's starting to hatch. It's got that running trim and that sort of thing. And that's Parsons. And this is the famous shot. So everybody thinks he came along to the Diamond Jubilee Fleet Review unannounced and ran up and down. Well, I think the Lord of the Admiralty knew about this. But he ran it up and down the lines of ships. Now, bear in mind that the fastest destroyer at this time, there was a French one that had just about coming into service, could just scrape 30 knots. So he's screaming up down there 33. A normal battleship is 18 to 19 knots, and a normal destroyer is 25. So he's actually gone to another level above. And that's what he proved by that. So there's little Turbinia there, doesn't look very much, but actually was a turning point in naval propulsion, probably for the next 50, 60 years. So to go through how the Royal Navy adopted it, well, he ran that trial in 1897. The Admiralty ordered their first ship in March 1898. That's how convinced they were it was right. Admittedly, we built lots of warships then. We had the biggest fleet in the world, I think bigger than the next two combined. That was the philosophy. So we ordered that from Parsons Marine Turbine Company. So it was a 65-meter long destroyer, displacing about just shy of 400 tons. Parsons, he got his company, obviously, as I said, he wasn't a shipbuilder. So he subcontracted the hull to Hawthorne Leslie of Heaven on Tyne. I mention that because that's where I come from, and most of my family worked at Hawthorne Leslie, so I'm allowed to say it. So it was launched in 1899 and commissioned in 1900. So hold in your mind 2,000 horsepower. That was Turbinia. Okay, that's our baseline. So Turbinia was built in 1894. She got to our final configuration probably about 1896. 4 years later, there was 10,000 horsepower installed on a ship. Admittedly, it was 4 shafts, and there was 4 turbines. So there's 2 high pressure and 2 low pressure. So we've now got turbines working in conjunction with each other, because they were just simple turbines. So you've now got the exhaust from the high pressure going to drive the low pressure turbines. And they were driving at 1,000 RPM direct, no gearing. So those propellers are spinning at 1,000 RPM. This is his problem with cavitation, because they're spinning so quickly. So that's why I had to sort out that. Now this configuration, just holding your head, was exactly what was used on Mauritania. 4 shafts, direct drive. Why was it direct drive? The gearing technology wasn't there at the time to deal with these powers at those speeds, because reciprocating engines do not revolve at those speeds. So the technology wasn't there in the gearing. And actually on trials, she didn't just make 10,000, she made nearly 12.5 and made 33.5 knots. Our contract speed was 31. I don't know how many ships exceed the contract speed like that. It's usually the other way in the interliquidated damages. So that was Viper. Then Cobra was the next one. She was actually speculatively rebuilt by Armstrong's, where he'd served his apprenticeship up the river. Similar size. She was purchased in 1800, where she was nearly complete, and she made 11,500 horsepower. Still, Parsons sold the turbines, so he's created the market to sell his turbines. And that's exactly what he's doing. And she made 34.5 knots. Both of them met, didn't last very long, and sank, broke up. But that wasn't a problem with the turbines. That was something different. So that had tragic losses. But then there was the Velix, which following on from the Cobra, was built again, Hawthorne Leslie's, similar size ship, and she made 34.5 knots on trials. Very similar, but now you've got the 2 sets of compound steam turbines directly driving. But you're now down to 2 props, the shaft, if you notice. At this point, the Royal Navy said all of our destroyers are now going to be turbine powered, full stop. No recip engines anymore. Now, bear in mind, the Navy still used recip engines into World War II for things like minesweepers and such things. But for frontline warships, recips are starting to go. Still carried on in merchant marine, get us wrong. But you know, your triple expansion engines were coming to the end of the frontline warships very, very quickly. HMS Eden, She was part of the E class, 36 class of ship. When was the last time the Royal Navy built 36 ships in a class? I don't know, but it's a long time ago. And this had 5 direct drive turbines, 1 high pressure on the centre shaft, and 2 on the outer shaft. So we've got 3 shafts. Plus, you've got cruising turbines, because obviously to push that sort of power, you know, anything you try to push power, you start to use more and more fuel. And ships, you know, warships, they're not like a merchant ship where you put the sticks down, do your 14 knots, and that's it, you just chug away. You know, they've got a fleet, they've got a battle speed, but then they've got a cruising speed or even an endurance speed below that. So they actually started to put cruising turbines in that were less power, but but it was quite a complex arrangement with these cruising turbines. Then the cricket class came along a few years later, 36 smaller coastal destroyers, so only about 50 meters long now. And these are only producing, you know, the turbine sets on board are only sort of 3,500 kilowatt, 3,500 shaft horsepower with about 2.5 megawatt, but still doing 26 knots. So we're still in excess of what a normal fleet destroyer was less than a decade before. And then the F class or the tribal class, full size ones, 12,500. So we're settling down at this sort of, you know, 12, 13, 14,000 installed horsepower and producing 13 knots. So that's a standard that goes forward then in the First World War. Obviously, then we'll start to look at larger ships. So the first protected cruiser, third class protected cruiser, and here she is, called the Amethyst, was one of the Topaz class. The 3 of our sisters were all steam recip engines, and she was put in. We'll build her with turbines so we can do a direct comparison on the ships. She was built again at Armstrong Whitworth and Elswick, where Parsons had served his time, and it had the same as the Eden, the same layout. And she made 23.5 knots. But the interesting thing is, she was 10% more efficient and 1.5 knots faster. So for less fuel, you were going faster. Now, bear in mind, these are all coal-powered ships. So your coal is a heavy thing. If you can reduce the amount of coal you have to carry, you either lighter in the water, less to push through the water, or that coal will give you that much more range. And bear in mind that the UK then was a global thing, and ships like this, these protected cruisers, were the ones that you went out on station and they protected the Far East station, that sort of thing. So they had to have good cruising ranges. And then the one we'll always heard of is HMS Dreadnought, which itself is a superb ship for so many different reasons. The first all-turbine battleship, but the first all-big gun battleship. So before that, the pre-Dreadnoughts, typically you had 3 caliber of gun. This then one, in essence, down to 1. Okay, you still had your 4-inch guns, but you didn't have the intermediate. You had like a 12-inch, an 8-inch, and then maybe a 6-inch. These had all 12-inch and 5 turrets compared to 2 turrets. So you've got 10 12-inch guns compared to 4 12-inch guns. And now she, well, just have a look, she's now up to 20,000 tons. So remember, Turbinia's sitting at about 50. This is only just over 10 years later, she's commissioned. She's 20,000 tons, and our installed power is 23,000. You know, maximum on trials was 27. So look at that jump in power. It's absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, your big gun battleship, yes, it's got the power to every other battleship was obsolete, but also it was a lot faster because the standard battleship then did 18 knots. This did 21. So all of a sudden, it wasn't just all the big guns. It could actually outmaneuver as well. So this is you know, the Dreadnoughts are so much more than just the big guns. It's the propulsion machinery as well, which is all down to Parsons. These are all Parsons steam turbines, and again, direct drive, because the gearing hasn't quite caught up yet, the gearing technology. So I want to end talking about ships. I could have talked about other navies that were quickly adopted by the French Navy and the German Navy. And we were also adopted in the merchant marine for cross-channel steamers, Irish Sea steamers, those sort of things like that go fast. And there were King Edward, I think, was the first one built at Denny's on the Clyde in Dumbarton. But I haven't got time to do all these. You know, it wasn't just the Royal Navy that was doing this; other navies were doing it, and the merchant marine were getting on board. Bear in mind, this is all happening within the space of less than 10 years. So this is the Mauritania. So bear in mind, we're about 10 years, maybe 15 after Turbinia has been designed. Well, actually 10 years after, because she's been designed in 1902, really. And we're talking, instead of, you know, 100 foot long, we're now nearly 800 foot long. Rather than, you know, 50 tons, we're nearly 40,000 tons. Still see fine block coefficient, but the LOV ratios come to something that would like now, about 8.5. That's pretty good. And LCB where we'd expect it for this sort of thing. And that's just it's actually, I think it's an apprentice drawing, sorry, I know it is, from Swans. So I've got that. That's a drawing that was done by an apprentice. So that's not an original, that's a one that was done in the 1970s. But it shows that, and I'll just show you the size. But something to notice from this is, compared to ships now, yes, we've got 4 funnels, and yes, all 4 funnels are used. It's not like the Olympic class where one was a dummy funnel. All 4 are used. That's the boiler rooms. Over half the ship is the boiler rooms to produce that power. And I'll show you the power in a minute. They're the turbine rooms. Sorry for those online. I can't really show you, but from about just forward of the forward funnel to after the after funnel, that's all boiler rooms, and obviously bunkers, cool bunkers. And then after that is where your propelling machinery is. So a vast amount of that ship is there to produce steam. It's a tremendous amount compared to what you think of now. You don't, you know, it's a different design problem. It's a different design problem. And there she is. So this is just before launch. It's Swans and Wallsend again, North Bank at the time. And this is where, if you've ever seen a super tanker has been launched at Swans, that's the same berth. So a bit like when Titanic and Olympic were built, this covered structure was built purely for Mauritania. And actually 2 of the yards and the engine builders all merged to be able to finance the bid to build. That's how expensive these ships were. And you can see there the 4 3-bladed propellers. They changed back and forth to 4-bladed and 4 and 3-bladed and all of other things. Certainly Lusitania had big vibration problems, which I had to solve. But one thing you do notice is, if you look very closely, and if you're a saddle like me, and you look at the aft end, that's a naval aft end, and that's a naval rudder. So it goes over further. And why? Because they were built with the potential of being converted into armoured cruisers. They never were, but they were built for that fact. And then the government actually underwrote the contracts with Huron. So actually the aft end's quite the navally aft end. And this is being launched 20th September 1906. So bear in mind, 10 years beforehand, Parsons was sorting out his cavitation problems. That's where he was with that little cavitation tunnel. Now you've got something 800 foot long going into the river. It's tremendous. And I can't say this because it's my presentation. The steeple there is the tallest steeple in Tyneside, and that's St Andrew's Presbyterian Church, where I used to go until it stopped being the church. And that's why I can say opposite there, where that is Hebburn. So we're in Wallsend looking at Hebburn, and that's where the Cobra and the Bellocks were built, in the Amethyst. Sorry, not the Amethyst, they were built up there. So you're seeing all this is going on in a very small community. The engines were just built half a mile downriver, which I'll show you in a second. So that's being launched. Right, and that's going out on sea trials in September 1907. This is build as trials, not official trials. So hold that to September 1907 in your head. You can see I'm going out. Something should have happened here. Turbinia should have been alongside going out there, because the idea was
you'd have the mother and the daughter going out, even though the daughter's significantly bigger than the mother. But a condenser wasn't working. And beforehand, she had actually been T-boned, and I haven't got the pictures in this presentation, but she'd been hit by the Crosby getting launched from Hawthorne Leslie's on the other side of the river. Somebody got the launching calculations wrong and the drag chains, and Crosby went a bit further and T-boned her. But she was repaired, but didn't make it out on that voyage. And this is what should have happened. So this is alongside at Swans a month later. So you can see there's Turbinia. See the size difference. Just brings it all to scale. So you've got something that Turbinia runs in Spithead 10 years before this. The advancement is just, I can't get it in my head. It's just, you're going from, well, I'll show you, 2,000 horsepower to what's installed there. So you can see her. She's lying there with nothing coming out of her funnels because she's not working, but she's put there and the photograph was taken, but it's a good photograph. And that's the Mauritania's machinery. So you've got the stern turbine at the back here, the low pressure and the high pressure turbines. And if you can see, there's chaps standing there to give you an idea of the size of the machinery. And the installed machinery, you've gone from 2,000 to 76,000 in 10 years. So actually, if you think of this the axial flow turbines, there were half a megawatt, 500 kilowatts. And now you're at 55,000 kilowatts. So, but you're still spinning those propellers at 180 rev because this is direct drive. So the Mauritania and the Lusitania are the only two ships, turbine-driven ships, to hold the Blue Riband that weren't gear turbines. All the ships that followed were gear turbines, because obviously the faster you can spin a turbine, you get more efficiency. The slower you turn a propeller, you get the bigger, smaller propeller turns slower is more efficient. So obviously this is a compromise because the gear and technology, as I said, wasn't. And Mauritania made 25.5 knots on trials. And when she was retired, 1930, I think 3, 4, 5. Okay, she'd been reboilered to run on oil, but she still made a contract speed of 23 knots after 30 years service, which I think is quite tremendous, actually. We think that, so it shows, because the technology is so young, you haven't got decades to design out all the faults. You know, you're designing on the hoof nearly here. So you know, you're not building up and learning from experience, because you've gone from, as I say, from 500 kilowatts to what in essence is tens of thousands of kilowatts in a machine. Okay, and there we are. That's Mauritania on the measured mile of Arran on Scotland. Okay, so Turbinia today, she's still here. I think I'm about on time. Yes, I am. So there she is. So she held as a major exhibit in the Discovery Museum in Newcastle. It's not far from Central Station, and that's at Turbinia Gallery. We're not very good at making up names where I come from. We'll build a Newcastle, we'll call the place Newcastle. Tyne has a mouth, we'll call that place Tynemouth. Hadrian's Wallsend, oh, that's Wallsend. So we're not very creative with the titles. So this is the Discovery Museum, and it's the Turbinia Gallery. So you can see our very fine lines forward. You can see the original riveting. As you get further on, there's welding. And I'll show you the next one. So there she is from the back. I don't know if you can quite see on the right hand side on the below water black bit. You can see that a little bit shiny below the funnel. So that's perspex, so you can see the turbines. So they've taken those plates out, so you can actually go and see the turbines. Because the ship itself, even though I hate to say it, being a naval architect, is only there to prove the turbine. Won't tell a marine engineer that. There's no marine engineers here, is there? Good. But so you can see that. And actually, if you look very closely, you can see, because she was, as I say, she was T-boned in 1907. She was put back together because you saw her floating again. She was lifted out of the water in 1908. And then in the 1920s, she was actually cut in half. And the back end was sent down to the Science Museum in Kensington.
and it lived there because obviously the forehand's not of interest, it's the machinery that's of interest. And then they came back up in the late 50s. And I know this gentleman I used to work with served his time at the Wallsend Slipway, and Turbinia was sitting at one of the ends of the big fab sheds, sort of just rotting away. And then in the 1960s, they moved out to what was Exhibition Park, if anybody knows that, in Newcastle, to build a proper pavilion for her. And then in the mid-90s, they moved down to here. So now she's never going to see again, but she is there to be seen. And we did at one time want to try to get a simulator in there. One reason we built a simulation model so you could actually have children going in there and driving it, but museums aren't funded as maybe we think they should be. So go to simulation. Nice segue, Keith. So there's little Mauritania alongside, sorry, little Turbinia alongside Mauritania at Wallsend. So we've simulated that. Doesn't move very much though, does it? But it shows what it should have done. Now, this is a simulation of Turbinia. So it's got no sound. You see, you're gonna have to put it with me. So what you've got, if anybody knows the River Tyne, on the left-hand side here is South Shields. So you just round this corner, going to the left, you're going into the harbour. So you're going up towards, that's the Port of Tyne right in the background. So that's what we call the Jarrow Slake. North Shields on that side. Just outboard of the picture would be where the fish quay is, to give you an idea. So this is the old Smith Dock. This was actually a simulation done 10 years ago. And we'll put Mauritania there, even though Mauritania was broken up in the mid-30s. And this is actually the ship called the Vista Fjord. It was a Saga Ruby, as it was then, which was the last ocean-going liner built in the UK. So that was built at Swans in 1973. So it's totally fictitious, this, but it's good fun. And actually, you can sit on the bridge. I haven't got any pictures of the simulator itself, but it's a full 360 mission bridge. And, you know, it's funny because she can see us just starting to heel over because she's losing outright stability because she's going up on the plane. She's losing the water plane and she's going right over. And actually, it's funny when you watch people do it because everybody goes like this. Even though the simulator is not on gimbals, it doesn't move the floor. But you can see her going over. And actually, if you do a hard turn, you can turn her over, which is exactly what should happen. So it actually shows we've got the simulator right. I will admit, made the propellers work. They're not exact. It's a simulation, not an evaluation. So we made the propellers produce the efficiency I thought they should be able to produce. And then this is a totally fictitious one again. And this is supposed to be that September 1907 of the Mauritania run a build as speed trails. So this is the mouth of the Tyne here. You can see the North Pier, North Shields there. Just off to your left is South Shields, and that's the turn where you just saw. And it's Whitley Bay to your right, and that's where the measured mile is, or was then. And that's where she ran her builders measured mile. So you can still the Turbinia still exists. You can go and see her, and actually you can still drive her if you go to South Shields Marine School. So that's really about all I want to say. I hope you found it enjoyable.
Yeah,